Imagine holding a smartphone, glass, metal, silicon, while sitting in a room built of reinforced concrete, lit by electricity, surrounded by machines that connect you instantly to anyone on Earth. Now contrast that with a world where survival meant grasping a sharpened rock, sleeping in caves, and relying on fire for light and warmth. That is the contrast between today and the Middle Paleolithic. Technologically, our Paleolithic ancestors had only stone tools, wooden spears, and fire. Socially, they lived in small nomadic bands, closely tied by necessity. Every meal required effort. Every shelter was temporary. Every injury risked death. But despite this, they hunted, traveled, adapted, and most importantly, evolved. This was the time when Homo sapiens first appeared, but we were not alone. Several other human species roamed the planet alongside us, each with different traits, behaviors, and adaptations. It was a crowded evolutionary landscape, competitive, harsh, and dynamic. To understand who we are today, we must understand the world they lived in. What tools did they use? What challenges did they face? What did they eat, and how did they think? What drove their survival, and ultimately, our success? This documentary goes straight to the heart of that forgotten world, a time before civilization, before agriculture, before history, a time when the roots of everything human were still being forged, by fire, by instinct, and by stone. The Middle Paleolithic was not just a chapter in our past, it was the foundation of our species. And to uncover it is to uncover ourselves. Part 2. A world of ice and grass. During the Middle Paleolithic, the Earth's climate was defined by instability. It was an age of cycles, glacial advances and retreats that reshaped entire continents. In the north, vast ice sheets blanketed much of Europe and Asia, locking land under kilometers of frozen mass. In contrast, equatorial Africa was dominated by sweeping savannas, sparse woodlands, and arid plains. Asia offered dense tropical forests, rugged highlands, and unpredictable monsoons. This was not a world of uniformity. It was a patchwork of environments, constantly shifting. For early humans, survival meant adapting to this unpredictability. Geography was not just background. It was a matter of life and death. Freshwater was critical. Rivers and lakes weren't just sources of hydration. They drew animals. They shaped migration routes. They offered fish, waterfowl, reeds for tools, and safe travel corridors. Some of the earliest human settlements, temporary though they were, clustered near water, because without it, survival was impossible. And life, though abundant, was often deadly. The Pleistocene epoch was home to some of the most formidable megafauna the planet has ever seen. Woolly mammoths roamed the steppe in herds. Woolly rhinoceroses thundered across frozen plains. Cave lions and cave bears ruled Europe's forests. There were aurochs, giant deer, and massive bison. Many of these animals were far larger and more dangerous than their modern relatives. Humans were not apex predators. They were opportunistic, clever, and cautious. Every hunt was a risk. Every encounter with a large mammal could be fatal. Yet humans learned to track, to coordinate, and to exploit the weaknesses of their prey. They used terrain, seasons, and group tactics not just to survive, but to thrive. Unlike today, where nature can often be distant and abstract, the Middle Paleolithic world offered no safety net. One misstep could mean starvation, injury, or being hunted. In this environment, instincts mattered, observation mattered, memory mattered. This was the stage upon which the drama of human evolution unfolded, a world where grasslands met glaciers, and survival was a daily calculation. To live here required more than strength. It demanded strategy, resilience, and above all, adaptability. Part 3. When we were not alone. For much of the Middle Paleolithic, Homo sapiens were not the only humans walking the earth. We shared this planet with at least 8 other species of the genus Homo, each uniquely adapted, each a different experiment in human evolution. The most well-known of these were the Neanderthals. Stocky and robust, they thrived in the harsh climates of Europe and Western Asia. They used fire, crafted tools, buried their dead, and likely possessed a sense of symbolic behavior. For over 300,000 years, Neanderthals persisted until their vital populations vanished roughly 40,000 years ago. But they didn't disappear without leaving a trace. Today, most non-African humans carry between 1 to 2% Neanderthal DNA, evidence of interbreeding that occurred during periods of contact. Farther east, another human lineage endured, the Denisovans. Known primarily from a few fossil fragments and their remarkable genetic legacy, Denisovans inhabited parts of Siberia, Tibet, and Southeast Asia. Despite the limited physical evidence, their DNA tells a broader story. Up to 5% of the genome in Melanesians, Aboriginal Australians, and Philippine Negritos can be traced back to them, indicating that Denisovans once covered a vast territory and interbred with migrating Homo sapiens along the way. Still farther south, in the Indonesian archipelago, lived Homo erectus, arguably the most enduring human species in history. First emerging around 2 million years ago, they spread across Africa and Asia, and some groups survived in places like Java until as recently as 100,000 years ago. Their tools were simpler, but their persistence shaped the evolutionary landscape for species to come. Homo longi, sometimes called Dragon Man, is known from a single skull found in China. With a brain size within the modern human range and robust features, this enigmatic species may have coexisted with both Denisovans and early Homo sapiens. Their precise identity remains debated, but they remind us how incomplete our fossil record truly is. Homo heidelbergensis represents a crucial branching point. Populations in Europe evolved into Neanderthals. Those in Africa are thought to have given rise to us. They were tall, powerful hunters who roamed both continents around 600,000 to 200,000 years ago. Meanwhile, in South Africa, Homo naledi lived in forested landscapes. With a small brain but surprisingly complex behavior, they may have buried their dead and used symbolic markings, raising difficult questions about the link between brain size and intelligence. On the island of Flores, Homo floresiensis, the hobbits, stood just over a meter tall. They hunted pygmy elephants and giant rats and crafted stone tools. Despite their size, they survived until at least 50,000 years ago. Finally, Homo luzonensis, discovered in the Philippines, adds another layer to the puzzle. To reach Luzon, their ancestors would have needed to cross open sea, a feat that implies a level of cognitive ability not previously associated with early humans. These species didn't just coexist with us, they influenced us. They competed for resources, interbred, and perhaps even exchanged knowledge. Today, their legacy is written in our bones and in our genomes. We are not the sole outcome of evolution. We are its synthesis. Part 4. The Origins of Homo sapiens. The story of our species begins in Africa, at a site called Jebel Irhoud in present-day Morocco. Archaeologists uncovered a set of human remains that changed everything. Dated to around 300,000 years ago, these fossils are the oldest known remains of anatomically modern Homo sapiens. The bones, skull fragments, a jawbone, teeth, and limb bones from multiple individuals revealed a mix of features. The facial structure was surprisingly modern, with a flat face and small brow ridges. But the brain case was elongated, not rounded like ours. The jaws were more robust, and the teeth larger. These early humans were not exactly like us, but they were unmistakably part of our species. From Jebel Irhoud, the evidence points to a Pan-African origin. Other fossils from Omo Kibish in Ethiopia, around 195,000 years ago, and Florisbald in South Africa, around 260,000 years ago, show that early Homo sapiens were spread widely across the continent. This challenges the old model of a single cradle of humankind and suggests instead a network of populations evolving and interacting over thousands of years. Then came movement. Homo sapiens did not stay in Africa. Multiple dispersals out of the continent likely occurred over time, some as early as 270,000 years ago. But many of these early attempts failed. Fossils in Greece, China, and the Levant show that small groups made it out but did not persist. Local competition, unfamiliar environments, and climate shifts may have overwhelmed them. These migrations were not yet the great success story. That came later. Around 70,000 to 50,000 years ago, something changed. A final wave of migration left Africa, this time successfully. This group spread through the Middle East, into Asia, Europe, and eventually to Australia and the Americas. Every modern human outside Africa descends from this single, powerful expansion. What made this wave different? Perhaps it was a breakthrough in behavior, symbolic thought, language, or more advanced tools. Perhaps it was environmental pressure or population growth. Whatever the reason, this time, Homo sapiens endured. We met Neanderthals in Europe and Denisovans in Asia. We interbred, absorbed genes, and kept moving. The world, once shared with many human species, became ours alone. Jebel Irhoud marks the beginning. The migration 70,000 years ago marks the turning point. Everything between was trial, error, and adaptation. The rise of Homo sapiens was not a single event. It was a long, uneven process across thousands of generations, until one group, at the right time, with the right traits, stepped out of Africa and never looked back. Part 5, The First Spears. The evolution of tools marked a turning point in human history. In the Middle Paleolithic, stone tools advanced beyond crude flakes into forms shaped with intent and precision. At the core of this transformation was a technique known as levallois, a method of preparing a stone core so that a single strike would produce a flake of controlled size and shape. This wasn't guesswork, it was planning. It required foresight, dexterity, and an understanding of materials. A well-executed Levallois flake was sharp, durable, and multifunctional. With it, humans could butcher meat, scrape hides, or craft weapons. But stone alone was not enough. To turn a flake into a weapon, it had to be hafted, attached to a shaft. Early humans began using resin from trees, animal sinew, and plant fibers to bind stone points onto wooden shafts. The result was the spear, a tool that extended the human body's reach and amplified its power. For years, Neanderthals were thought to use only thrusting spears, implying close quarters, high-risk hunting. But discoveries at sites like Schöningen, Germany, challenged that view. There, wooden spears dating back 300,000 years were found, remarkably well preserved. Experimental testing showed they were aerodynamically balanced and capable of being thrown over 20 meters with accuracy and force. Neanderthals were not just ambush predators, they were skilled distance hunters. Homo sapiens, however, took things further. At sites like Katanga in the Congo, barbed bone harpoons have been dated to 90,000 years ago, used to spear massive prehistoric catfish. This innovation points to an understanding of aquatic hunting and tool specialization. But the most transformative leap came with the invention of the bow and arrow. The earliest known evidence for bows comes from South Africa at Sabudu Cave, dating to around 64,000 years ago. Small, finely crafted stone tips suggest projectiles far lighter than spears. These weren't designed for hand throwing. They required mechanical assistance. The bow allowed for silent, long-range precision. It was portable, reusable, and deadly. With it, Homo sapiens could hunt more safely, more efficiently, and in more varied terrain. The implications were enormous. A lone hunter could now bring down prey from a concealed position. Groups could coordinate from a distance. This wasn't just a new weapon, it was a strategic revolution. By expanding the range of attack and reducing the risk of injury, these tools changed the rules of survival. The balance of power between predator and prey began to shift. The spear, the harpoon, and the bow didn't just feed our ancestors, they reshaped their behavior, their societies, and eventually, their dominance over the natural world. This was the beginning of a technological trajectory that has never stopped climbing. Part 6. What did they eat to survive? In the Middle Paleolithic, survival depended on a single, inescapable question: what can be eaten? The human diet during this era was not specialized. It was opportunistic, adaptive, and wide-ranging. From massive prey like mammoths and woolly rhinoceroses to fish, shellfish, mushrooms, wild fruits, and insects, humans consumed whatever the environment offered. In some regions, coastal Neanderthals harvested mollusks and even dolphins. Inland, they hunted reindeer, wild sheep, and horses. In Belgium, isotopic analysis shows Neanderthals had a meat-heavy diet, while in parts of Spain, they relied more on mushrooms, pine nuts, and even moss. Their choices reflected the environment. Flexibility was survival. Recent studies, including a 2023 cross-cultural review of foraging societies, challenge long-standing assumptions about gender roles. In nearly 80% of documented hunter-gatherer societies, women actively participated in hunting, not just gathering. This suggests that Paleolithic life may have been far more egalitarian than previously imagined. Roles were fluid. What mattered was contribution to survival, not rigid division of labor. Meat, once acquired, wasn't hoarded, it was shared. In small nomadic groups, cooperation wasn't optional, it was essential. A single successful hunt could feed many. This communal sharing of food helped reduce risk, minimize conflict, and stabilize the social unit. Distribution of meat acted as a glue that held bands together, reinforcing trust and reciprocity. But not all times were plentiful. During environmental collapse, isolation, or famine, desperation took darker forms. Archaeological sites like Goyet Cave in Belgium and Blombos Cave in South Africa provide evidence of cannibalism. Cut marks on human bones, signs of boiling, and marrow extraction suggest that at times, humans consumed their own species. This was likely not a regular practice, but a response to extreme scarcity. The ability to consume a wide range of food sources, plants, animals, fungi, and even insects offered a significant evolutionary advantage. Unlike predators locked into a specific niche, humans adapted their diet to the landscape, season, and situation. This dietary plasticity became a cornerstone of our success as a species. It allowed our ancestors to colonize new environments, endure climate swings, and outlast more specialized competitors. The real power of the human diet wasn't just what we ate, it was that we could eat nearly anything. Part 7. Symbols on the cave walls. Long before the first written word, long before agriculture or monuments, early humans left behind something far more enduring: symbols. Etched into stone, painted on walls, and carved into bone, these markings offer a rare glimpse into how our ancestors thought, imagined, and expressed meaning. Evidence of symbolic behavior begins not with Homo sapiens, but with Neanderthals. At a site in Croatia, eagle talons show cut marks and wear patterns that suggest they were worn as personal ornaments, perhaps as status symbols or ritual items. In caves across Spain, red-painted symbols and stencils have been dated using uranium-thorium methods to 64,800 years ago, a full 15,000 years before modern humans are known to have arrived in the region. These artworks include abstract shapes, ladders, and dots. This challenges the long-held belief that symbolic thought was exclusive to our species. When Homo sapiens did begin to express themselves, their art was more complex and varied. At Blombos Cave in South Africa, Ochre stones with engraved crosshatch patterns and shell beads have been dated to around 70,000 years ago. These are not functional tools. They are deliberate designs, abstract, symbolic, and possibly communicative. In the same cave, there is evidence of pigment processing, a kind of Paleolithic paint kit. Further east in Lang Bulu, Sipong 4, a cave on the Indonesian island of Sulawesi, a panel nearly 5 meters wide shows a hunting scene. Wild pigs and buffaloes surrounded by human-like figures with tails and animal snouts. This depiction, at least 43,900 years old, is the earliest known narrative art, a visual story encoded in pigment and stone in Europe, from El Castillo Cave in Spain to Chauvet in France. Cave art flourished around 40,000 years ago. These artworks include animals drawn with incredible skill: bison, horses, mammoths, often depicted in motion with perspective and shading. These were not idle doodles. They reflected ritual, memory, and perhaps early belief systems. What do these marks mean? No one knows for sure, but they tell us one thing. The mind of early humans was not limited to survival. It reached outward, inward, and into a Part 8, fire, a tool across time. Fire was more than warmth, more than light. In the Middle Paleolithic, fire became one of the most transformative forces in human evolution, reshaping how we lived, what we ate, and where we could survive. Evidence for fire use appears across continents. At Kesem Cave in Israel, burnt bones and ash layers suggest regular fire use as early as 380,000 years ago. In Zambia, at Colombo Falls, signs of controlled fire, charcoal, charred logs, and burnt grasses date to around 180,000 years ago. In India's Belan Valley, traces of hearths and scorched soil go back more than 50,000 years. In France, at sites like Terra Amata and Saint-Césaire, fireplaces and burnt bone layers confirm that early humans used fire habitually and strategically. This was not accidental. Fire was intentionally gathered, maintained, and controlled. It was used for cooking meat, making food easier to chew and digest. It warmed shelters, extending habitation into colder regions. It repelled predators, making nighttime safer. It hardened wooden tools and allowed humans to settle in environments previously too dangerous or harsh. But Homo sapiens didn't stop there. In South Africa, at Still Bay culture sites dated to around 164,000 years ago, early humans used fire in a new way, to heat-treat stone. By carefully heating silkcrete before napping, they improved its workability, producing sharper and more reliable tools. This was deliberate, skilled, and technologically advanced. Heat-treating stone required a deep understanding of fire's properties, temperature control, material response, timing. It was one of the earliest examples of humans using fire, not just for survival, but for manufacturing. The widespread mastery of fire changed everything. It altered ecological boundaries, allowing humans to move into colder climates. It enabled longer waking hours as firelight extended life beyond sunset. It shifted social structures as groups gathered around hearths, fostering communication, planning, and cooperation. Fire also left lasting marks on the landscape. Controlled burns shaped local ecosystems, encouraging the growth of certain plants and clearing hunting grounds. Human influence over fire was, in essence, the first step toward environmental management. More than any single invention before it, fire bridged biology and culture. It gave early humans a strategic edge and a psychological anchor. Wherever fire burned, people gathered. Around it, they cooked, talked, planned, and imagined. The control of fire wasn't just a technological milestone. It was a turning point in the human story, a silent revolution that still burns in every home today. Part 9. Conclusion: the journey of our ancestors. Life in the Middle Paleolithic was unforgiving. It demanded constant vigilance, physical endurance, and mental flexibility. But it was also a time of innovation, when the foundation of what it means to be human began to take shape. Our ancestors faced extreme climates, unpredictable landscapes, and powerful predators. Yet they survived, not through brute strength alone, but through adaptation. They shaped stone into tools. They mastered fire. They learned to hunt together, to share food, and to build trust in small groups. In their minds, symbols emerged. Art began. Stories were born in gestures, markings, and memory. The achievements of the Middle Paleolithic were not sudden. They were the result of hundreds of thousands of years of trial and error, passed through generations that left no written record, only bones, tools, ash, and art. But through these traces, we see the rise of something distinctly human: cooperation, creativity, and an expanding awareness of the world. Neanderthals hunted mammoths with wooden spears. Denisovans crossed mountain ranges. Homo sapiens lit fires in caves and etched abstract symbols in the stone. These weren't just acts of survival. They were signals of transformation. Each innovation, each adaptation, moved us one step further from instinct and one step closer to imagination. We did not rise alone. We emerged from a complex web of hominin species, some of whom contributed their DNA, others their technologies, and still others their silence. Many of them vanished. We remained. Today we live in cities that never sleep, speak to machines that understand language, and send images across the planet in seconds. But our story began in the darkness of a cave, illuminated by a flickering fire. The journey from stone tools to smartphones wasn't a leap. It was a long walk, generation by generation, footstep by footstep. The Middle Paleolithic wasn't a lost world. It was the beginning of the one we know now. And every aspect of our modern lives, our families, our fears, our ingenuity, and our dreams still echoes with the survival, resilience, and creativity of the people who came before us.